Let's just look at the 119th Congress. It has some ups and downs along the way. We just passed the biggest piece of legislation in years in the one big beautiful bill just the last week that we were in session, and people said that there was no way that we could ever do it. And I continue to say failure's not an option. Of course, the crypto legislation that is on the floor is within other committees of jurisdiction from the House Ways and Means Committee. We're working on our own crypto items that's not on the floor. But I truly believe that we'll be able to iron it out, get it together, and pass it. We have always, whether it's funding government, whether it's the debt extension, people didn't think we could do it. It got a little rocky, but we still got it done. And it's going to happen the same here today.
Chairman Smith, if we see passage today or even later this week of the Genius Act, do you anticipate that this will clear a path eventually for something on market structure? We know that this is another bill that has been in the works, but it seems a little bit further behind in terms of development and perhaps support, too, among lawmakers.
I think without a doubt, there's a comprehensive effort to make sure that we are the crypto capital of the world. That's what President Trump has said over and over again. We had a hearing this morning in the Ways and Means Committee on cryptocurrency and taxing digital assets. This is another point that has to be addressed and looked at. And that's what the Ways and Means Committee is focused on from this gamut within the digital asset space. It's super important, as you know, to the markets, to investments. There's 50 million Americans that are involved with digital assets. So that's pretty substantial. And we need to make sure we continue to be the world leader.
Well, of course, markets and investments also care very much about tax policy, which is why we all paid such close attention to the tax changes and extensions that were included in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, one piece of budget reconciliation. But Mr. Chairman, the chair of the Budget Committee, Jody Arrington, told our colleagues this week that he wants to work on a second budget package to pass by the end of the year. I wonder if you see that as likely, given how hard it was to get the first line across the finish line, and what, if any, tax changes you would want included in a second reconciliation package?
Well, let me just say there has never been two partisan reconciliation bills that have become law in the same year. It's never happened before. So trying to do a second one is doing something that when the Democrats controlled the White House, the House, and the Senate, they attempted to do two and then ultimately couldn't pass Build Back Better. And then the next year, they did a second reconciliation bill, but it wasn't in the same year. So it is extremely difficult to do, because passing a budget reconciliation is not easy. As you saw, what we passed just recently, which is the largest tax cut in U.S. history, the largest spending cuts in U.S. history, the largest welfare reforms in U.S. history, the largest one-time investment in border security in U.S. history, that wasn't easy. And we had to pass it just in the House. The first initial vote was 215 to 214. Right. So it was by one vote. The Senate, J.D. Vance had to do the tie-breaking vote. So it's very, very difficult. But if we come up with a reconciliation package that addresses needs for working families, small businesses, and farmers, we'll get it done. But it needs to make sure it addresses those points.
Chairman Smith, I wanted to shift gears a little bit and talk about tariffs and tariff revenue. To set up the conversation, I wanted to bring in something we heard from Peter Navarro on Friday on this program, talking about tariff revenue.
I would say that for the American people, these tariffs are a great boon. I brought a chart here. It shows that we've already collected like $100 billion of tariffs.
A record for a single fiscal year.
Yeah, the tariffs are working, and they were these kind of revenues that we're getting. It's a very important part of the big, beautiful bill in terms of financing that as well.
Chairman Smith, how much are you expecting on the committee in terms of revenue from tariffs that the president has imposed this year already, and the other tariffs that we are expecting not only on U.S. trading partners, but on sectors, on goods in various sectors, including drugs and semiconductors and autos and so forth?
So let's just look at the last month in June. This is something that a lot of people's not paying attention to or discussing. If you look at the revenues that came within the federal government and the expenses we had, last month was the first time since June of 2016 that we had a month that created a surplus, not a deficit. Of course, we need a surplus for 12 different months, but if you look into why did the month of June actually have a surplus and not a deficit spend, it's because of the increased tax revenues, but also the increased tariff revenues. Those are the two biggest issues that led to making sure that government was balanced for the month of June. So tariffs do play a part of the role. I've said all along, when you're looking at the fiscal sanity, the fiscal responsibility of government, you have to look at three different legs. You have the tax issue. You need certainty in the tax code. We just finished that with the one big beautiful bill. Then you have the trade mechanisms, and then you have the deregulation. Once you do those three legs, that will create an economy that will go gangbusters, and it will help us balance our budgets. And these trade agreements that the president's working on, you're even having CEOs now of some major U.S. companies that's going out there saying, I was opposed to the president's tariff policies, but they're really not making an impact. They're not inflationary. They're not raising prices, and I think they're working.
Well, Mr. Chairman, we know that President Trump is paying close attention to that lack of an inflationary read-through, at least at this time, from his tariff policy. And he sees that as further justification for his view that the Federal Reserve should be cutting interest rates right now. I'm sure you're aware of the reporting, which the president has pushed back on, that he was considering firing the chair of the Federal Reserve. Do you believe he would have the legal authority to do that? Is questions over the cost of the renovations to the Fed buildings here in Washington justification for firing for cause?
First off, I will tell you, I agree with the president that interest rates should be cut. Interest rates were raised because we went through an inflationary crisis during the Biden administration where inflation went up 22%. We now have the lowest inflation that we've had in 4 years, but yet they've not reduced one time the interest rates. So he has a valid point when you're talking about the interest perspective. If you look at other heads of different agencies, whether it's the IRS commissioner chose to step down whenever President Trump was elected so that President Trump could put in place his person. This is something that I would consider Mr. Powell to do. He should consider resigning because clearly he's not aligned with the president of the United States. Other people's done that within the agencies. I think Chairman Powell should consider his place in government right now.